Welcome to the July edition of the Reid Report. I'm Paul Varian, Chief Administrative Officer with Oakville Soccer Club, joined as usual by Nigel Reid, soccer analyst, CBC, who's been covering the Women's World Cup. Nigel, in your June edition of the Reid Report, you spoke about how you felt this Women's World Cup would go. Now Canada sadly have packed their bags, they're back home. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this: I've got egg on my face for a start, but I'm not the only one, Paul. We all thought that Canada would be so much more competitive in Germany than it turned out. All the signs leading up to the World Cup were positive. But when the lights went on and the curtain went up, Canada just wasn't at the races. And it's horribly disappointing. Really, really distressing to see Canada perform so poorly. But really, we can't sugarcoat this. In my estimation, they were outplayed in those first two games against Germany and against France, and they were outmuscled in that final game against Nigeria. And a lot has got to change before 2015. We'll talk about that in a while, but before Canada hosts this competition in 4 years' time.
Where did they fail, Nigel?
Well, I think essentially, technically speaking, they weren't good enough. I think that has to be said. We've seen at this World Cup there are marvellously skilled players from Brazil, from Germany, from England, from Japan, from the United States, and by and large we haven't seen that from Canada. Now, is that because they froze on the big stage? I think that's part of it. We know, because we've seen this team play before, that they are better than what they produced in Germany. But generally speaking, given the changes that Carolina Marazzi made during the tournament, very few players, if any, stepped up and showed that they are technically competent enough to really compete at the highest level of the women's game. And the highest level, of course, is the Women's World Cup, and I think that's got to be a concern.
Nigel, obviously Oakville's interest in this competition was Diana Matheson, the influential midfielder, a product of this club. We followed her very closely. What was your analysis of her performance during these three games?
I think Diana did what Diana always does. She always puts in a shift. She runs her heart out, and she plays with the great Canadian spirit and pride. You can see the heart bursting out of her. She did as much as she was allowed to do in this tournament. I wouldn't necessarily single Diana out and say she had a magnificent tournament, but then I wouldn't say that about any of the Canadian players there. But she certainly did what we all know and expect Diana to do. She put in a shift for the team in every single game.
Right. We must move on. We, I guess, have to chalk this down to a bad day at the office, so to speak. Clubs like Oakville Soccer Club, and there's a lot of conversation happening now about the role that clubs play in the development of the next national team. What do clubs like Oakville have to do to create a national team, both men and women, that can compete at the World Cup?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that clubs like Oakville has to do. I think firstly, youth soccer clubs have to educate youngsters in terms of a love for the game. They have to engage them and put them on a path to a lifelong love and passion for soccer. That's the first thing. So whether or not they become good enough to play at a competitive level, is almost a byproduct. The fact is that these youngsters will grow up loving soccer and being interested in soccer. Secondly, I suppose from a technical point of view, we've got to teach our youngsters better. We've got to go back to basics, Paul. We've got to teach them the rudiments of how to trap a ball, how to pass a ball, and how to move a ball. Because if you don't do that at a young age, the golden years, they will never learn. I mean, Carolina Marazzi will get roundly criticised for what happened to Canada in Germany, but she can only work with what she's got. It's much too late to start changing players' way of handling the ball when they're in their mid-20s. They've been educated in a different way. They can only do what they've been taught to do as youngsters. And we saw particularly in the France game, and Kaylin Kyle talked about it, after they lost that early goal, they panicked and they went back to, kick and chase, the old style. They didn't trust the new system, and that has got to be eradicated.
So how much of this is really, when it gets to this level of soccer, it's mental as much as anything else? I mean, didn't that really show out in these games?
Well, for sure, absolutely it did. Mental strength at the elite level, well, at any level, to be fair. If you can win that psychological battle before you ever get to kick a ball, when you're standing with your opponent in the tunnel and you look across at your opponent and you give them the eye, and you tell them this is not your day because this is my day, because I know I'm going to win my individual battles with you, and so are my teammates. That is where Canada has to get to. There is a level in Canada that has not yet gone beyond that plateau. We saw it in qualifying for the World Cup. They were better than Mexico and most of the other teams. They didn't concede a single goal in World Cup qualifying. But when it got to the big stage, something changed. And part of that has to be the mental preparation. They didn't mentally believe they could go out and could compete with Germany, then France, and then the confidence was shattered for that final game against Nigeria.
I see Jason deVos, our technical director here at Oakville Soccer Club. Come on in, Jason. Jason, of course, has been providing commentary for CBC during these games, the technical director here at Oakville Soccer Club. Come on in a bit there, Jason. Jason, you've mentioned in your broadcasts how important it is for technical development at youth age groups, particularly the golden years, 8 to 12, the responsibility clubs like Oakville have to deliver this. Speak a bit about that.
You know, I think what's very clear, Paul, from watching the women play, we can analyze, you know, the performance and the preparation of where things went wrong for that particular group of players. But I think for the big picture overall, for the development of the game in our country, we've got to look at the overall system of that these players were developed within. We have to change that first and foremost, so that it's not about 20 players. It's about all of the players in our country. Are all of the players in our country getting that technical foundation that they need to get at the right age, which is between the ages of 8 and 12, the golden years of learning they're referred to often in long-term player development. If we get that right, we'll give more players the tools they need to be successful later on in their career. Whether they go on to play for the national team or not is obviously a very, very small percentage of players. But if we can do a better job as a club of giving all of our players those key fundamental skills, they're all going to go on and enjoy a higher level of competition in the game, have more fun, because they'll be better equipped to succeed in the game. And ultimately, I think that's what we are all about as a club, is getting every player that chance to be successful in the game.
Jason, big news out of Oakville Soccer Club this week. The club announcing its new technical development plan, focusing on player, coach, and referee development under one synchronized plan. Speak a bit about that and how that ties into what you're speaking about in terms of youth soccer development.
Well, I think ultimately what we're trying to do here as a club is get all of the program moving in the right direction, as opposed to just focusing all of our resources on one pocket of the club, whether it's an academy or the rep program or the house league program or the open development program. We want to encompass everything. So we want to encompass players, coaches, referees, volunteers, administrators. So everyone is working together for the betterment of the game in Oakville and across the province of Ontario. I think we can do that. It's a long process and it's going to take time, and this is the starting point, I think, for us as a club. I haven't been here that long, less than a year, and you know, I'd love to be able to flick a switch and change things overnight and instantly make these changes happen, but it does take time to implement these changes. I'm really excited about the changes that are coming online, the hiring of our age group directors who will oversee each age group, male or female, a very professional coaching staff in place that obviously will work closely with myself and the coaching development manager of the club. You know, so I think what we'll have then is a coaching staff at the club who are all trying to do the same thing, which is develop the players. Right. Give them the best chance of success by teaching them the fundamentals at the right age so they can go on and enjoy success later on in their soccer careers.
It's been the Reid Report, the July edition. Joining me, Nigel Reid, and our technical director, Jason deVos. Make sure you tune in for the next edition.